Hi, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk a little bit about notifications or service requests. Systems are a little different. Some systems are called notifications, some systems service requests. I'm sure there's some other names out there. Try not to get service requests confused with service requisitions. Service requisition is just like ordering a part, except you're ordering a service. So if you want somebody to come out and do some work on your boiler, you might put a service requisition in for that vendor. We're not talking about that today. We're talking about notifications and service requests. And essentially, these are a pre-work order. And so the customer typically inputs these either directly in the system, or they're making a phone call or sending an email to somebody, and one's getting put in the system. But essentially, this is an input for somebody to do some triage work and decide if it's going to be a work order. Not everyone is using this functionality, and we'll kind of go through some of the uses right now. Typically, this can be used for the approval of something to become a work order. And that can either take advantage of a workflow or not. And so either somebody is triaging it and deciding, yes, this is a work order, it becomes a work order. Or they are triaging it and maybe it goes through a workflow process, say to the owner of that area or to the line where the work might need to be done, and it kind of goes through an approval process and then becomes a work order. Either one of those uses is certainly acceptable. The other use, or one of the other uses for notifications or service requests, are for other teams to kind of get work done. So if you have a facilities organization that does moves or catering or landscaping, you might want to use notifications that never become a work order, because this can go through a workflow process and still have statuses and get closed out. You could use the notification system to keep track of how many times you use moves or catering requests or whatever the case may be. And so you can use notifications to operate without things becoming a work order and getting muddled into the maintenance organization. Now, there are certainly ways to also use the work order system for that and keep those things separate from an analytical perspective, but the easiest thing to do is just keep them as notifications. Typically, when a customer puts in a notification, there's not really enough information on it. The customer doesn't necessarily know an asset if it has to be drilled down to asset, or they'll just put in a work order that says there's a leak in the bathroom. And you don't really get enough info. That doesn't really say what bathroom or where at on site or a whole bunch of other things that could be inaccurate on that system. So that's the reason for the triage. Either the planning organization or whoever's responsible for doing that triage, make sure that the information is correct. Some things that are best practices. One, the use of classifications on notifications is maybe not a common thing to do, but a best practice that I like to call out. So if you have a classification system that allows a customer to say this is a plumbing issue and there's a leak, then you may have attribute lists that ask specific questions. And so the attribute list for a customer that says there's a leak could be, well, is it a drip or is it pouring water all over the place? Is it a safety hazard or is it dripping into the sink? Is there puddled water or not? And so you may have questions that become the attributes in the classification system. If you want more information on classifications, go to our YouTube site and take a look at the video on classifications. But essentially, the classification attribute system can be used to ask questions of the customer to give you more detail. And so you could use that. Additionally, there are some required fields that should definitely be populated on a notification or service request. One, who's the requester? What is your name? How do I get in touch with you? What is your contact information? The description, believe it or not, out of the box, not every system has description as a required field, so you're going to want to make sure that's required. Potentially location of the issue or location of the customer would be required. And of course, if you're going to use the classification attribute system, you're going to need classification and the attributes as required fields. Otherwise, you're not going to get the data. The customer's going to say, please help, and that's all that comes across. And you might get a whole bunch of those, and you probably typically do. And anyhow, so the notification or service request is essentially a mechanism for you to do a pre-work order, potentially go through an approval process, and give you some more information so that you can then convert this information into a work order and either go through the planning process or send somebody out to get the work done. And they typically don't have enough info, and so you got to have some required fields. Another use is for things outside of the maintenance organization so that the other groups can use the notification process essentially as their work order system. So anyway, that's a quick overview of what notifications and service requests are all about. Have a great day.